Welcome, it's your friendly neighborhood Badger here, and yeah, it's been a while since I've given you a build guide. I'm not going to beat around the bush or talk too much on this one. I'm going to let the rest of the stuff I've recorded speak for itself, but what can I say? Discharge with upwards of 50 million average hits. It's pretty fun. It's not a leak starter, it's not too tanky. I definitely wouldn't do it on a budget less than 10 Exalted Orbs, but it's the most fun build I've ever played. If you're wondering why I'm speaking in such dulcet tones, I don't need to hype this one up. It's just awesome. That's it. Let's go. I want to talk about the mechanics of this discharge build in particular, because there's a few mandatory things that you need to get it working, and then quite a few optional things to really bring the power up. So, as you may or may not know, just quickly about Discharge, all of these charges around me, my power and frenzy charges, which I have a lot of now, these charges are needed for Discharge to do any damage whatsoever. It deals flat damage per charge on you, and it consumes all the charges to deal a huge AoE damage. So if I press the button, you'll notice they disappear, but then they come back because I've got some interesting things generating all of those charges. So, it consumes power and frenzies to deal cold and lightning damage, so we're scaling both cold and lightning damage, and the way that we generate our charges is fairly simple once you understand how it does work. But it does need 2 mandatory uniques and 1 extra mandatory craft on a piece of gear with some gems in there as well. The mandatory uniques, first of all, go like this. Farrell's Fur. Now, Farrell's Fur gives you aspect of the cat has no reservation, so you need an aspect of the cat craft on a piece of gear. It gives plus 2 seconds of cat stealth duration, bringing cat stealth and cat's agility, the 2 flip-flops as you can see up here. Cat stealth, cat's agility, they are 6 seconds each on the base. But then each time that you gain cat stealth, so every single time that you gain this one here, this blue one, you gain up to your maximum power and frenzy charges. Now this means that, you know, if you lower the cooldown or the duration of cat's stealth and cat's agility to basically 1.2 seconds as I have right here, every 2.4 seconds you generate all of your charges. Now, how do I have so many charges? Well, the build stacks power charges on the tree using void batteries, but also using Badge of the Brotherhood to mean that our frenzy charges are equal to our power charges. So instead of on the tree, us having to spec into, you know, all of these frenzy charges everywhere, we don't need to worry at all about that. We just stack into all of the power charges we can, and we get, you know, power charges through the Assassin Ascendancy. This one right here, we get power charges through a bunch of other ways as well, such as on the helmet, on the weapons. We can generate 13 power charges, which then gives us 13 frenzy charges. There is... you're able to get 14 if you do double corrupt a +1 power charge helmet, but I haven't got that far. The baseline that you can get just from the tree and the Ascendancy is 7, then with the void batteries, which is pretty darn cheap right now, goes up to 9, and then you're looking at 10 on the helmet, you're looking at 11 and 12 on rings, which are very expensive, and then you're also looking at 13 from the Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh jewels. Wait, Forbidden Flesh with Swift Killer allocated there, and where's the other one? Forbidden Flame up there. Meaning that you get to 13, and as I said, double corrupting the helmet for 14. And that's how you get some pretty insane damage. Now, right now, we have we have concentrated effect in the links, and you can still see that the area goes all the way out to just after the crafting bench right here. Actually, a little bit further. We can also switch in increased area of effect to make it even larger, and if there were mobs in this room right here, every single mob would be hit by my discharge right now, which is pretty darn crazy. The reason for that is a +5 to discharge radius helmet enchant, and then discharge also scales its percent area of effect per charge consumed. So you can see it right here, it has 20% increased area of effect per charge consumed. If you've got 28 charges, That is 560% increased area of effect on a fairly large radius to begin with. So you can see that right there with the massive discharge. That is the base concept of how the build works. We're going to jump into all of the POBs, talking about all the defenses, everything else, all your mana issues, all that kind of stuff in a moment. But yeah, let's get right into it.
Skip out, skip out.
Alright, let's just jump straight into the meat of the build, because there's a lot to talk about. And the first thing that I'm going to say here, this is not a cheap build. This is not a league starter build. I'm sure I talked about that before. But the gear that you're going to see that I first talk about right here is super expensive, but then we're going to talk about all of the budget options and what you need baseline to get the build working, which I've already talked about as well a little bit before. However, as you can see over here, Discharge can be pushed to insane average hit damage. Right now, we're sitting on about 54 million average hit. Now, that is huge, but that is with, you know, a double corrupted Feral Spur. It's with corrupted Void Batteries. It's with Power Charge Rings. That's with Swift Killer Forbidden Jewels. You know, there's a lot of things in here. You know, Bottled Faith, Watcher's Eye. There's a lot of things in here that really, really up the damage. And the difference between, you know, this gear here of 54 million and the baseline gear and the baseline jewels, 14 million, you know, it's 40 million more damage. However, with the baseline gear, you're still hitting 14 million average hit, and, you know, to top it off, you do have a little bit more life as well, which is pretty nice. Actually, quite a bit more life, and still the same kind of defenses. The spell suppression is not quite hitting full right there, but that's just because I think I'm using Surge Binder. Yeah, if you switch out Surge Binders and put in some gloves with good spell suppression and then a little bit of spell suppression on the helmet as well, easily 100% spell suppression chance right there. But first of all, we're going to talk about my gear that I have on my character right now. Now, if you do want to look at this character, it's called Bosskiller, so Bossdger. You can search it on my account. You can also import the whole build if you want, but this build guide has basically got all of the gear that I'm working on right here. And there is a massive note section that I've written out for the build that you should definitely read through. It has answers to a lot of questions people do have, but if you've got any other questions about the build, come watch me live on Twitch, twitch.tv/thisisbadger. I'm more than happy to answer it. Alright, items. Let's get into it. First of all, we're looking at the Void Batteries. Now, Void Batteries are pretty standard, but I do go for double corrupted, oh sorry, not double corrupted, just single corrupted damage penetrates Void Batteries. Now, these Void Batteries aren't actually that much more damage than a standard Void Battery right here without it. You can see here, it's giving me, how much more is it giving me? 2.2% more damage. So these are completely non-mandatory. The Void Batteries themselves are very, very strong. You can, however, also use a +1 power charge implicit shield, and then you can craft, you know, life and that sort of thing on that if you do want to, but I've decided to go the route for full DPS because Void Batteries is a little bit more damage right there, dual wielding them. The helmet itself is a Awakener Orb, so a double influenced helmet that I'm then also trying to double corrupt in a chamber for +1 power charge, but I haven't been successful yet. However, I tend to go for the discharge radius option right here, but you can go for the discharge damage if you don't care too much about whole screen coverage. However, the radius really, really gives you about like 20 to 25 more radius on every discharge once you have all of the stacking right there. So the Awakener Orb is +1 power charge and enemies take increased damage. You can also get spell suppression on here, and you do want a little bit of life on this one as well. You do also want to make sure that you do have evasion rating on the helmet in some regard, because on the tree itself, you are taking the mastery of a 10% chance to suppress spell damage if boots, helmet, and glove all have evasion. So you do want to make sure that your helmet does have some sort of evasion on it, or just find enough spell suppression in other ways. Now, the Feral Spur, mandatory item, non-mandatory double corruption right here. I double corrupted this one myself. Unfortunately, it hit +2 level of socketed Warcry gems instead of AoE gems, but we still did get the +1 level of socketed gems right there as well, which is about, yeah, it's about like 11% more damage than a standard Feral Spur right there. The gloves that I'm using, I'm actually thinking about switching these out for some rare gloves to just get some more life and spell suppression and switch out of some spell suppression in other places. But these gloves right here give +2 AoE and +2 aura to our auras. So that's Grace, Purity of Elements, and Zealotry. So it is, you know, helping our helping our evasion and helping our damage here as well. If I switch these out just for a standard Surge Binders, our evasion goes from 36 to 32,000. But, so, you know, it's not fully needed. You don't need this at all. You can instead opt for, as I said, some gloves with Unnerve on them. So the Eldritch Implicit of Unnerve on hit is really good for some rare gloves right there. I would very much recommend that. But Surge Binders does give you increased elemental damage per frenzy charge and spell damage per power charge. So it gives you a lot of increased damage. However, we're stacking a lot of increased damage from Void Batteries, and we're also stacking a lot of increased damage from Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh with the Swift Killer node allocated from Trickster right here. So this is giving us increased damage per frenzy and power charge right there. So we are stacking probably too many sources of percent increased damage, but that is something that Discharge really does need. Alright, moving on to the boots. Honestly, the boots are just standard boots with spell suppression, life, and movement speed on them. Now, something that's pretty important with the boots, because it gives you a lot of damage, is dropping Scorched Ground while moving, lasting a certain amount of seconds. This is another Eldritch craft. So if you go on top of the boss with this, and then Discharge, you're getting, with the increased effect of non-damaging elements, you get about 12% Scorch on the enemies, which you'll see in the configuration right here to emulate Scorch on boots. We have nearby enemies have negative 12 to elemental resistance right here. That's basically emulating what Scorch is doing right there. Moving on, Amulet, Badge of the Brotherhood. This is, you know, very important for the build. It's needed. I've decided to allocate Mark the Prey, because we're using Assassin's Mark for some good damage, but you can allocate something like Whispers of Doom for an extra curse, and then you could get, you know, a different double corrupted Surge Binders with elemental weakness on it, so you can apply 2 curses. There's a few different ways that you can go about using this one. Now, the rings themselves, I've decided to go for a Precursor's Emblem with +1 max power charge and a very bad 2-stone ring with +1 max power charges here. You can see how terrible this is. The only stat on there that's doing anything for us is 38 strength and the power charge right there. Now, the reason that I haven't gone for one that's not corrupted is they're about 100x as a baseline to buy a synthesized implicit 2-stone ring, or sorry, any ring. And this one right here cost me a very cheap price of 5 Exalted Orbs for an extra power charge right there. So all this is doing is giving me about 22% more damage. I don't need this. I probably should switch this out for more defense or something like that, because my life is only 4.5, but that's basically how that is right there. Just in terms of, you know, if you don't have much budget, just go for some Vermilion rings with good life and good resistances, some strength on one of them, and to really help your mana, you can go the non-channeling skills, have -7 to total mana cost right there as well. Extremely, very nice. The belt itself, you can just go for a Hunter Stygian Vise or a Hunter Leather Belt with a really good life roll on it, and then grabbing some resistances on there as well. This is one I crafted myself in about 5 prismatic and pristine fossils. I was very lucky, but, you know, it was a pretty good belt that I crafted. It doesn't need to be as good as this, just get high life and high resistances on the belt, just make sure that you're capped. The flasks themselves, there's one that's very important, which is the Enduring Eternal Mana Flask. Now, Enduring Eternal Mana Flask means that we can basically discharge however much we want. Because we are still using our mana and not using anything like Eldritch Battery, this is actually pretty mandatory in the way that I'm running this build. However, I know that a lot of you don't like, you know, relying on a mana flask. There are a couple of options that you can use. You can use Inspiration in your links on Discharge, and then your mana regeneration will be totally fine because you're only discharging once every 2 seconds. You can use Eldritch Battery if you get enough Energy Shield. Right now, my build only has 31 Energy Shield, but if you get like a hybrid, you know, a hybrid helmet, hybrid boots, and hybrid gloves, you can get, you know, 200, 300 Energy Shield, meaning that all you need to do is use a couple of extra points to spec into Eldritch Battery right here. You can go 1, 2, 3, and then take a point right there. You can get Eldritch Battery, and that means your mana problems are completely solved. There's a couple of options. I just prefer to go for the Eternal Mana Flask because, you know, I've just done that for a really long time. Bottled Faith is a little bit of a flex right here. You don't need it, but it does give you about 10% more damage with this one right here. If you don't have a Bottled Faith, you can just swap in a Diamond Flask just to make sure that your crit chance is capped, which is another very important thing about the build. Even if you have like 95% crit chance, because of the cooldown of Discharge, it's going to feel really trash when you don't hit a crit. Basically, mobs don't take damage from you if you don't crit because of how much crit multi we have and how the scaling works on all the stuff we've got from crits here. So getting to 100% crit chance is very, very important. I have 100% crit chance without the Bottled Faith right here, and that's just because of all the power charges. Basically, we want 100% crit chance up, non-conditional, which is what we do have right here. And that's basically it, you know, Quicksilver, Jade Flask, and then, you know, a Divine Flask right here as well. And lastly, with the jewels, we've just got some jewels like this one here. Maybe a triple crit multi-jewel, or you can get a double crit multi-jewel with some life on it, or if you're really, really wanting to pump the money, a triple crit multi-jewel with some life, which is probably what I want to move these into, but, you know, I don't really want to invest the currency full into those. And then the Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Flesh, these are very expensive, but they allocate Swift Killer, and they give you about 30% more damage. Actually, we can see there, if I take this off, Forbidden Flesh, yeah, 32% more damage right here is what this is going to be. Wait, is it 32 or is it even more? Hang on. Nope, it's 40% more damage that this Ascendancy gives you, which is extremely strong. Lastly, I do have a Watcher's Eye with crit strikes penetrate elemental resistances when affected by Zealotry, and chance to suppress spell damage while affected by Grace, meaning that we cap our spell damage through, our spell suppression through here. But once again, you don't need that. To be able to cap your spell suppression without that, you do want to be using Surge Bind, not Surge Binders, you want to be using some different gloves right here, some rare gloves. Just with spell suppression on them, and then potentially getting more spell suppression on your helmet. That's all my gear for the full endgame version. If I was to estimate the amount of currency that's invested in this, I would say about half an Exalted Orb right now. I would say baseline, it's about 10 to 15x. Then you're talking another 60x for the Forbidden Flame Jewels. You're talking another 40 to 50x for the Precursors. You're talking 5x for this jewel right here. And then you're also talking, you know, look, Farrell's, actually, it's probably more than half a mirror. I'd probably say getting closer to 200x on the build right here, but that might be a little bit generous with how I'm pricing all of this. But to get it working, this is all you need. We'll switch to the baseline gear, and you can do this right here as well. Non-corrupted Void Batteries, just a high life, you know, aspect of the cat helmet, a non-corrupted Farrell's Fur. One thing that's very important that I did forget to mention earlier, this Farrell's Fur does need to have 5 to 6 blue sockets on it. Now that's 5 to 6 off colors. And you might think that's really, really difficult to do. That's going to be super expensive. Not as expensive as you might think. First of all, you can just benchcraft 3 blue sockets on the Farrell's Fur. Do it a couple of times until you hit 4 blue sockets. Then all you need to do is take it into Harvest and go non-blue to blue 2 times, or 1 time if you want to keep a red there for inspiration. Now, if you're on SSF, you can just run Harvest to do this. It might take you a little bit of time, but you can definitely guarantee it. Non-blue to blue. And then if you're on trade, you can just buy it from the Forbidden Trove, or if a friend has one, you can ask that friend. Non-blue to blue from Harvest, and it's completely easy, and I think it only costs about... How much is non-blue to blue? I think it was like 50 chaos each try or something like that. So it's like maybe another X on top of the Farrell's Fur that you do have to get it to the sockets that you do need. So don't fret too much about that. It's really, really easy to get all of your colors and links working there. Non-corrupted Surge Binders, but once again, if you're doing the budget version, honestly, I would say switch these out and just go some rare gloves. Rare boots, Badge of the Brotherhood, Vermilion rings right here, you know, Stygian Vise, and then the flask right here. And then the jewels themselves, either double crit multi life or triple crit multi right there. But I would definitely go for the double crit multi life over the triple crit multi. So I've just copy and pasted a double crit multi life a few times there because we're switching out the Watcher's Eye. So this baseline gear is what you need to get it working, and it's still has 14 million average hit. That's almost enough to one-shot most map bosses in the game, and you're still going to be chewing through the endgame bosses there as well. Honestly, the build has too much damage. In terms of defenses, it's not crazy defenses. This is a softcore build. I talk about all of this in the notes right down here on the defenses. However, there are some layers of defense that make the build playable, and some ways you can up the tankiness by a lot. First of all, the mandatory defenses are high evasion through Grace and Evasion gear, capped spell suppression, purity of elements for ailment immunity, and a minimum of 4.5k life. Now, 4.5k is going to mean that you feel real squishy. On my endgame build, I feel real squishy, but it is literally a glass cannon. It's kill or be killed, and that's how I love playing this build. So if you're still watching this build guide, you're already past that point of, is this too squishy for me? You want to play this build. So, however, you can make it more tanky by switching out Zealotry for Determination, giving you about 12k armor. Now, it's not enough for massive fizz hits, but enough to stop the small hits chunking your life. And you'll also notice I have almost no chaos res. This can be overcome just by getting some more chaos res on gear. Totally fine. You can also, there is a little bit of chaos res you can pick up on the tree over here with One with Evil, but it does mean that you've got to spec, you know, a few more points to get that. I wouldn't recommend this. Honestly, you can get like 30 chaos res on, you know, some boots and the helmet and, you know, the gloves there as well if you do want to, bringing you above positive. Honestly, my softcore mentality is you don't need chaos res, but that's a stupid softcore mentality to have. You obviously do need chaos res in a lot of situations in the game. I just prefer not to. Bandits and Pantheons. Honestly, I took a Lyra on this build just for the little extra of resistances that I did get, but it's not needed. The mana regen and crit multi is also nice, but you can do more with the extra points. Pantheons, I would say mandatory is Brian King's Soul for stun recovery or not being stunned if you've been stunned in the last 2 seconds. Stun is a massive killer on the Discharge build. If you get stunned during the animation of Discharge, your charges don't get consumed, but Discharge goes on cooldown, and you can't discharge for another 2 seconds, so you've got a lightning warp right out there. Optional is any of the small god ones right here, but I do like the unaffected by burning ground from the upgraded Abrath is really nice right there. So that's all of your items and everything like that. Let's switch over to your skills, and then we're going to talk about the passive skill tree. Let's get into it. First off, starting with the big boy itself, Discharge. Now, because we're not actually scaling a lot of plus levels, Discharge is very important to get a level 2120. Though, due to the abundance of 2120 gems in this league, just from them dropping from league mechanics everywhere, it's super cheap. You don't need to worry too much about that. The next off is Elemental Penetration. Because we're using 2 different damage types, Elemental Penetration is also really good. Now, this is not a gem that you can buy from the vendor. This is only a vendor recipe gem, which uses a replica Bitter Dream and I think a level 20 cold penetration, fire penetration, and lightning penetration. You vendor that all, and then you get a level 1 elemental penetration gem right here. I just bought one though on Trade League. You can definitely buy one if you want. Next one is Power Charge on Critical. This scales with your power charges, so the more power charges you have, the more that Power Charge on Critical is giving you, and with 13 charges, it gives me 51% damage. So it's a huge gem if you are stacking power charges. Next off is Trinity. Now, Trinity is really good for builds like this that have, you know, an equal amount of 2 different types of elements, but there is a little bit of a caveat with Trinity, and that is it's not going to be applying to your first hit, or sometimes even your second hit, or anything like that against bosses, because you do have to stack that resonance. Now, Trinity right here is giving, you know, it's giving 46% more damage, but if we don't have resonance, you can see our damage drops from 54 million to 37 million. So this is kind of our hit without Trinity right here. So there's a little bit of PoB warrior happening right here, but Discharge can still reach these numbers. It's just with Trinity right here. If you don't like that, you can switch Trinity out for something like Hypothermia is probably the next best one right there, and you still hit up to 48 million right there with Hypothermia. And that means, you know, you use a green socket right there because you are going to be chilling. Hypothermia is a super good a good slot right there as well, but I do prefer Trinity because, you know, the prolonged boss fights where you're hitting 2, 3, 4 times, you do start to ramp up your damage. It's like charging, you just keep going. Each discharge just feels like it's pumping out more and more power, and that feels really fun. Our next link is increased critical damage. Because we've got totally enough critical strike chance, increased critical damage is super fine. Then concentrated effect for bosses, and you can switch in awakened increased area of effect right here as well. Now, a lot of people ask me, Badger, like in your build guides, you've got too many links there. If you see too many links, just count the first 6 as your boss, and then the other ones are kind of your switch-ins. Awakened increased area of effect gives you 90 AoE radius right here, and we can go to the radius right here if we have a look at Discharge. Look, it's pretty large. The radius is very huge. But yeah, that's basically it. Let's go through everything else. Last of all, just for the Discharge links, if Discharge costs too much mana, if you're having mana issues, switch out Inspiration. And that's all in the notes. You can switch out Inspiration for Trinity is what I would do right here. Alright, then we've got just a Defiance banner and an Armageddon brand. Now, Armageddon brand is pretty important because this is used to proc elemental equilibrium. Because we don't have a flat damage source of cold or lightning anywhere in the build, Armageddon brand is only dealing fire damage, and this is really good because it applies a massive damage mitigation to the enemies through elemental equilibrium. It basically applies a negative 25 resistances, which is, you know, almost 20% more damage on the build with this one right here, which is very, very strong. So Armageddon brand on the bosses first, and then you Assassin's Mark the bosses, and then you discharge for massive damage. A little Immortal Call cast when damage taken setup right here of just level 1, level 3, but you can pump the numbers to level 3, level 5 if you do want. That's totally up to you. It just depends on how you like to play, but I like to run it really, really low with a level 3 Immortal Call right there. Now, it wouldn't be a softcore build without a Cast on Death portal. Now, Cast on Death portal, honestly, for a build like this, I really, really, really enjoy it. Those random one-shots that do happen to you means you can get straight back into the map and just keep grinding. And then we also have, now this is the helmet setup with our Swift Affliction and Less Duration. Now, this is once again extremely mandatory for the build, having Less Duration and Swift Affliction linked in your Aspect of the Cat craft. Now, because we have Aspect of the Cat crafted on our helmet, our Less Duration and Swift Affliction, coupled with the nose on the tree that give reduced skill effect duration and the less skill effect duration mastery right here, means that our Aspect of the Cat goes from a 6-second rotation, so 12 seconds in total, to a 1.2 second rotation, or 2.4 seconds in total. This means that instead of getting our Power and Frenzy charges every 12 seconds, we get it every 2 seconds. Very, very, very mandatory to have these right here. However, we can also utilize our movement skill, Lightning Warp, in these same links. Less Duration, Swift Affliction, to lessen the duration of Lightning Warp, and then also put faster casting in there, meaning that we have absolute instant casting right here.
Low on mana.
Oh, low on mana. But this is basically how our movement looks. It's extremely strong, extremely fast, and yeah, really, really, really good. There's that one right here. Then we've got Purity of Elements linked with Zealotry and Grace and a level 3 Enlighten. Now, level 3 Enlighten is a little bit of money. There's a little bit of a hidden cost right there. But you can even run, you know, like a level 1 or a level 2. It just means that you are going to have to switch a couple of things around on the tree and take the Evasion Mastery for Grace has increased mana reservation efficiency. That one's pretty mandatory if you don't have the Enlighten, and you'll still have to probably use Inspiration as well. And once again, Zealotry can be switched out for Determination if you do want that extra armor right there, but, you know, Zealotry is giving you 26% more damage, especially if you've got that damage penetration Watcher's Eye right there. That's basically all of the links. We're going to move on to the passive skill tree, and then that's basically it for the build guide. If you've got any questions, please come ask me on Twitch, twitch.tv/thisisbadger. Lastly, not too much to talk about other than the passive skill tree. We'll talk with the Ascendancy because I chose to play Assassin on this build. You can play Occultist, but Assassin has a higher ceiling, and Occultist is a little bit more difficult to get an easy 100% crit chance. Let's just talk about how Assassin works right here. First of all, we want to be taking Unstable Infusion into Deadly Infusion. Unstable is giving us our 1 extra power charge, which gives us an extra frenzy charge from Badge of the Brotherhood, and then we're also using Deadly Infusion for crit multi per power charge, and then plus 1.5 crit strike chance while at maximum power charges. Then for some defenses and, you know, some really nice elusive effect, we gain Mistwalker. You take no extra damage from critical strikes while elusive, and you gain elusive on critical strikes. So basically, you don't take extra damage from crits because you're pretty much always elusive. And then you've also got Opportunistic right here. So 25% more damage while there's at most 1 rare or unique enemy nearby, and 20% reduced damage taken while there are at least 2 rare or unique enemies nearby right here. So this is really, really nice if you're fighting multiple bosses in invitations for the reduced damage, or if you're just fighting single bosses, you can just nuke them down with your damage right here. Then obviously Swift Killer is optional with the jewels, and you get Swift Killer from the Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Flesh. But let's talk about the tree itself. It stretches a little bit. As you can see, it has quite a bit of a loop around here, but there's a lot of good reasons. There's a couple of mandatory things like your elemental equilibrium down here and your window of opportunity. So that's where you're going to be going. You're coming down here, you're picking up window of opportunity, you're picking up constitution for some life, then you're also picking up charisma for all of the mana stuff right there. Picking up blood drinker, the jewels, the infused, and then you're also going into instinct, some more life right here, some throat seeker, and then picking up infused flesh for a little bit of damage recoup, which is extremely nice because we don't have a lot of regen on the build right here. We also want to pick up static blows because this gives us effective lightning ailments, meaning that we can very easily cap our shock. Although this might not even be needed. The only reason I also do have this is the duration of lightning ailments, because the duration of shock is a 2-second duration kind of baseline. This gives a 50% increased duration, meaning it goes to 3 seconds, meaning that our shock can actually carry over to the next discharge. One very, very important thing, I always have people asking, Badger, why don't you take Disciple of the Forbidden? It's 5% more damage. It's not. Because it gives +1 to minimum power charges, this means that Discharge cannot actually consume that charge, meaning that it's basically useless right here. So we actually take the mana regeneration rate per power charge, we take the crit strike chance per power charge, we take the crit multi per power charge right here, which is a 10% damage node, but then you do not take Disciple of the Forbidden. This is a bait, do not take this. Okay, let's move on. And then lastly, just getting down here into the Sovereignty and then picking up the last charge over here. And then once again, anointing Mark the Prey over here. For the baseline, the absolute baseline, you're doing something like this. You're going through and you're just making sure that you pick up, hang on, that's level 85. You're making sure that you pick up all of the charges. Getting down to level 77, you're probably also not taking this one right here. This is what I would kind of say is baseline, like level 72 right here. Let me just put all those points back. Yeah, just basically making sure you get all your charges. If you're switching into the build, as many charges as you possibly can have. You know, 7 on the tree and then 9 from the void batteries. If you're starting with 9, that's 9 power charges, 9 frenzy charges. That's 18 charges. That's extremely strong, and you can switch into the build there. But I would not switch into the build until you have those things, until you've leveled through the story, until you've got, you know, enough points to pick up all the mandatory stuff on the tree. And yeah, that's going to be enough for you. That's all I really have to say on the tree itself. Thank you so much for watching. You know that I'm not talking about leveling right here, but that is because I'm just going to include like maybe some caster leveling stuff in the description down below. This is not a build to level with. This is a build to respec into, or, you know, yeah, level with a generic caster build until you do have the levels to be able to switch into the build. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think about the build in the comments down below. It's so much fun. It's honestly the most fun I've had with a build in a really, really long time, albeit a little bit on the squishy side, but hey, that's what you get for playing a build that does 54 million average hit. Thanks for watching, guys, and until next time, Badger is out.